What's up, guys? Episode 24. Thanks for tuning in. If you guys want to see the workout that I'm doing in the video, just hit the description and I'll put the whole thing there. But today, we're going to go through some questions from Instagram. So, from the broadcast channel, if you guys haven't joined that yet, please do. And let's just get right into it. So, the first question coming from Rayanne the 13th. He says, key tips for people trying to lose 100 plus pounds of weight fast but healthy. So that's a great question, and I have a few suggestions. The first has to do with food. And I think the most effective and easiest thing to start with is time restricted eating. So basically, you want to eat within a 12 or a 12 or a 10 or an 8 hour window. And if you want to start with 12 because it's a little easier, that's good. Then you can work your way down to 10 and then 8, and that's a solid place to be. And why is this, more? Why do I advocate for this more? And that's because I believe, even for me, even for somebody who's never been overweight, just for people in general, human beings, it's a lot harder to control the amount of food you eat versus the timing at which you eat. Because if you stop eating before you're thoroughly satiated, it's a recipe for disaster. You can fight it off, via willpower for as long as possible, but eventually that will backfire. You will binge, you'll take few steps back and maybe enter that bad cycle that you're currently on that led to you being overweight. So that's the number one place to start. And I wouldn't even stress about what you're eating or anything like that. First, dial in the times. If you can dial in the time and commit to that and eat to your heart's content during that eating window, but outside of it, you fast and you stick with that, that's step one. From there, step two would be eating the right foods, obviously. And we've talked all about this last podcast, so I won't get too much into it. But that's kind of the order of operations I would follow. So I would try to restrict the time that I eat because that's number one. That's easier to do than restricting the amount of food or even changing the food that you're eating. Once you have that dialed in, you will actually have a much better relationship with food. You have a better relationship with your body. There's so much that you learn and experience through just this time restricted eating. It starts to regulate your hormones. You start to get hungrier at predictable times. You're not hungry at the late night times, etc. And more specifically too, and I said this last podcast, you want to make sure that eating window ends at least 2 hours before you go to bed. And that is a huge game changer for a lot of things, even your sleep, recovery, all that type of good stuff. So that's what I would do on the eating side is I would first get down to an 8 hour eating window and be able to consistently sustain that. Now, let's say you've done that for 2 weeks. I'd say if you can maintain that for at least 14 days, you're on a great path. And then from there, you can start to alter the actual foods that you eat. And obviously, I went pretty in depth on this last podcast, but just to reiterate, you want to make sure you're eating whole, organic, natural foods that are basically free of ingredients lists. So you're eating the ingredients themselves as whole foods, right? So that comes later, and that's a little bit more difficult, right? But once you get the timing down, you will develop that discipline, that good relationship with your body, good relationship with food, and then you can actually switch out the foods that you eat for much better and higher quality foods. You can start prioritizing protein and fiber, all of that type of stuff, but I still wouldn't even limit or count calories because again, that could lead to it backfiring where your metabolic rate might be higher that day. You might be more hungry. You resist it, and you can only resist for so long. A couple days later, you binge. You're back on the cycle. So I would really advocate for getting the times down, then fixing the quality of your food, then really trying to optimize for high protein, high fiber foods. And once you're at that point, your body regulates the rest. You will have already lost weight throughout that journey itself. So that's the eating side. What about the exercise side? So I would, first off, walking is amazing. Like just walking. And if you could walk while you're fasted in the morning, let's say, walk for 45 minutes to an hour every single day, or at least get 10 to 15,000 steps total in your day. You do that and you follow the eating window and everything I just said about nutrition, you will be in a great spot. You will be shedding weight a lot faster than you would imagine just doing simply that. You don't even need to get in a workout. You just need to move. Move your body, eat less. And instead of eating less by trying to control your calories and whatnot, just keep it in a window and watch how you naturally start to eat less that way. So that, I think those two tips itself, you'd be surprised at how fast you can lose weight that way. And once you've seen progress, once you've established consistency, let's say 2 to 3 weeks of the walking as well, you're about a month and a half in of time restricted eating, you're walking every day, you're starting to become more mindful of the actual food that you're eating during your eating window, then you will have seen progress, you will have developed consistency in a habit, then you can start to introduce actual like workouts. And what do I recommend? Obviously the kettlebell. I think the kettlebell universally is great because for a lot of overweight people, body weight exercises on their own can be difficult because they themselves are pretty heavy and it's a lot of weight to push around for push-ups or even body weight squats or even especially rather pull-ups. So I wouldn't even get into any of that. Get yourself a kettlebell. If you're a man, I would start with about 16 kg. If you're a woman, I would start with either 8 or 12 and just begin simple workouts like swings and presses. Just super simple stuff that doesn't involve too much, um, work or energy or even mindfulness toward the act. It's just super simple as can be, like some of these workouts that you see me doing. Maybe the one literally just swings. If I were you, I would just get into kettlebell swings, start doing swings 4 times a week, 3 to 4 times a week. But that comes later. I'd say to keep things simple and concise, time restricted eating and daily walks. That you would be so surprised how effective that is. And it takes a load off of your shoulders because you don't have to worry about the calorie counting, eating the right foods, all that stuff. That will all come later once you've actually gotten into the habit of doing these two things I'm talking about. So, Rayanne, I hope that helps. The next question comes from Avinash Bika, and he asks, can you deep dive into optimal breathing for kettlebell training? That's a great question. I love this question. And I'm not going to like speed through these questions, so I might not even get to a lot of them, but I think that the topics and the conversation around it is what's valuable here, and I'll continue to answer these questions on the next podcast. So, deep diving into the breathing, that's a really good question. So, I would say it's much like martial arts. You see, like when you're a boxer or, a striker of sorts, they teach you to sharp exhale out as you throw your punch, as you throw your kick, as you put force forward. That sharp breath out helps to engage the deepest parts of your core and give you a little bit more power behind your punch, let's say. Same exact principles apply to kettlebell training. So every time you swing, you snap your hips for the swing, sharp exhale out, and as the load is coming down on you, whether it be a squat, whether it be the kettlebell falling down for the swing, whether it be the kettlebell falling down from the snatch, whether it be you lowering the kettlebell from a press, you're breathing in deeply. And the idea is you want to breathe deeply into the rib cage. You want to almost imagine your rib cage is expanding 360 degrees. You see, most people talk about belly breathing, and that's great. But actually, you want to be breathing in such a way that your core is expanding, like I just said, 360 degrees. And there's a term that a lot of us kettlebellers use called breathing through the shield, because through most of these movements, like the movements you see me doing right here with squats, cleans, anything like that, we're engaging the core. So how do you breathe into the belly when you're flexing the core, right? That is what we call breathing through the shield. You want to keep the core engaged, but you still want to breathe deeply into the belly as the core is engaged. And what will happen as a result is your rib cage will flare. And that's exactly what we want for ideal breathing. We want your diaphragm to drop into the belly and create space for your lungs to expand and the rib cage to expand. And what this does, getting a little technical here, is this starts to create what's called intra-abdominal pressure. So as you lower for your squat, as you absorb the force down for a swing or a snatch or anything like that, you're bracing your core all around. And then as you come back up to fire, whether it be the swing, the snatch, or standing up for the squat, sharp exhale out, engage the deeper layers of the core, and get more power behind whatever you're doing. And this is a super important topic, guys, because most, if not all of you watching right now, have improper breathing mechanics, which I used to have as well. Most people nowadays do, unless you have specifically done breath work, trained in yoga, or even trained with kettlebells. And a lot of us breathe up here. We don't actually breathe into our belly. There's so many different reasons why I can go into, but it's pretty much our modern lifestyle with inflammatory foods, sitting too much, contorting the posture, our ego forcing us to keep our belly in because we're afraid to let it relax and go and people see our belly. All of these things combined start to create the dysfunction of the diaphragm. When the diaphragm's not operating functionally, you're not getting as much oxygen as you could, you're not efficiently breathing to support your energy systems. And this has implications, guys, outside of working out. This is just daily life. You're literally missing out on so much. And it also starts to create bad posture and low back pain and all this type of stuff because what I just told you, that intra-abdominal pressure can only be fully created with a proper functioning diaphragm. And when you establish that intra-abdominal pressure, you will not have any back pain. You will have a strong core. You'll be braced and able to handle the load of whatever you're doing. So the breathing is absolutely crucial. And kettlebell training specifically, is amazing for teaching you how to breathe properly. Why? Because like I alluded to earlier, a lot of us use our upper chest and like neck to breathe. So we're using the upper respiratory muscles without actually tapping into the lower respiratory muscles. Like when you breathe properly, guys, you can feel your breath, and it's not actually the air that's going down, it's the pressure of your diaphragm dropping. You can feel it all the way down to your balls or that area, whoever you are, it doesn't matter. That area, you can feel it all the way down there. The pressure drops, and that's how you know you're breathing fully deeply and your diaphragm is working properly. So why do kettlebells help you get to this like easier is because when you even just holding a kettlebell, even just holding it like as a farmer's carry, just on one side or whatever, both sides, you're loading these upper respiratory muscles. So they're occupied. You're occupying them with this weight. And then when you do things like the swing or the squat or anything while you're holding these kettlebells, you're forcing your lower respiratory muscles to work because the upper ones are occupied. So this starts to teach your nervous system how to breathe properly. And something really interesting that I heard from, I used to work at a physical therapy place in college, and that was like, my job outside of school. And that's where I learned a lot about this stuff, like intra-abdominal pressure, proper breathing, all that stuff outside of yoga. That's why I actually chose to work at this physical therapy place, because I was doing so much yoga, and this therapy place was like actually advocating for this kind of, abstract stuff like breathing and stuff that you normally would not learn at a physical therapy place. So I thought, this is amazing. So where was I going with that? Yeah, so I forgot. I lost my train of thought. But anyways, so, oh man, what was I going to say? I lost it. That's sad. But anyways, yeah. So anyways, the kettlebell is crucial in kind of, oh yeah, thank God. You see, when you ruminate on something long enough, it starts to come back to you. So the way that they used to teach this is, I forgot exactly. I think it's called, the system behind all this intra-abdominal pressure breathing stuff is called dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, DNS. You can look that up right now. Say it again. Dynamic neuromuscular stabilization. And basically the theory behind this is we have the innate capacity to breathe and move properly from the moment we are born. We are born with this. If you notice a baby, the baby's belly is completely relaxed. His or her diaphragm is working perfectly fine. They're mobile, they're loose, and even into childhood. You see, kids at the swimming pool or whatever, their like guts are hanging out. They've got little six-pack guts, but their guts are relaxed. They're breathing, they're moving, they're flexible. They can sit on the floor. They feel great. And then as you age, as we start to sit into chairs, as we start to develop the ego, as all this stuff starts to happen, we lose this capability. But the idea behind dynamic neuromuscular stabilization is that we have these movement and breathing patterns already hardwired into us deep in our nervous system. So if we can just tap back into that by doing these movements, by trying to breathe properly, by trying to kind of re-educate the body, after so long, it starts to be like, oh yeah, I remember this, I get this, and all of that function starts to come back. So, and that's the beautiful thing is, if you trust the process and you do, these sorts of things like trying to breathe properly, exercising with kettlebells, etc., your body just starts to click. It'll just remember, and you'll start to effortlessly breathe normally again. Your mobility will start to reemerge. Like all this stuff, it's all there in us. We have these capabilities in us. Like even there's a lot of people who think like, oh, I'll never be able to touch my toes, or I can't do this or that. You can do all of that. You can do all of that. You just have to retrain the body. We were all born with these capabilities. We were all, unless you had some sort of, ailment or deformation or something like that, God forbid, we all have the ability to breathe properly. And it all starts with proper breathing. Your posture, the way you perform, the way you move, the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you react to things, how much stress you hold. It's all about breathing. And we all have that built in. So, sorry, I was a little all over the place, but I hope that answers the question. Happy to go even deeper into that if we need. Okay, let's go to the next question. So this is from Ryan DS06. He says, what kettlebell workout frequency would you recommend for an older grappler? That's a great question, and something I struggled with a lot when I was doing a lot of jiu-jitsu. It's like, how much should I work out? How much is too much? And it also depends what your goals are, right? So there's so much to think about. Usually with grapplers, especially older guys, maybe you're competing, but it's not like a professional thing for you. It's totally recreational. Usually, I guess there's one of two goals, and usually it's both. But one is you want to maintain your muscle mass, and you want to have a good-looking body. And of course, jiu-jitsu is amazing for your body, yada yada. But it can be a lot of cardio. And if you just do jiu-jitsu, you just have the jiu-jitsu body, you wouldn't look that like amazing. Like maybe you would, just if you're genetically lean or whatever, of course you can, but it doesn't necessarily like build a physique, right? That's why a lot of jiu-jitsu guys who are extremely good at jiu-jitsu are very unassuming. They look like they can't hurt you. And then you get on the mat with them and you realize quickly that they're on a whole nother level. And that's amazing. But we want to obviously build and maintain a physique as we train jiu-jitsu. So what is the right split? So I would say, and it also, the other thing that we want to focus on too is actually getting better, strength, endurance, power endurance for jiu-jitsu so that we can perform better. We have more cardio, we're stronger, we feel better, and that makes the whole jiu-jitsu experience more fun as well. It doesn't hurt to be more strong and overall athletic and mobile for jiu-jitsu. It only helps, right? So that's also the goal. So I would say, first of all, it depends on how frequently you're training, but I'd say the ideal split between the two for a recreational grappler, especially an older guy, would be 3 days of jiu-jitsu, 3 days of kettlebell training, let's say, and then 1 day rest. I think that's the perfect split because you do your jiu-jitsu on, let's just say arbitrarily Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, you got jiu-jitsu, and then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you got kettlebell workouts. That's all you need. You could even get away with 2 kettlebell workouts a week, but if you wanted to really boost your performance of jiu-jitsu, maintain your physique, whatnot, I would advocate for just splitting both of them down the middle so it's not too complicated. And for your workouts themselves, I would make sure you probably limit them. Like stick to like more minimalistic things like I'm doing and limit it to, maybe no longer than 45 minutes. Like make sure it's absolutely no longer than 45 minutes so that you still have, juice for your jiu-jitsu rolls for the next day. And it gives you enough, you're not overtaxing your system so you can actually recover. And you can still make gains, in your physique, in your performance, in your strength, your cardio, 3 days out of the week with the kettlebells. And you can still make progress and, keep learning and getting better at jiu-jitsu by going 3 days a week as well. If you go less than 3 days a week for jiu-jitsu, you're likely, going to be progressing very slowly and you won't be able to keep up with a lot of the other guys there, which is not as fun. And if you only do 2 days of kettlebell training, for example, that you can actually get away with more than the jiu-jitsu thing because jiu-jitsu is highly like skill and technique. It's not so much about like, getting a good workout. Of course, that's the byproduct, but it's more of something that you need to constantly expose yourself to so your nervous system gets the hang of it. For kettlebell training, you could train a little bit longer, like maybe 45 to 50 minutes, and that's it. But yeah, it looks like this is the end of this video, guys. So I'm going to stop at this question, and I will keep going. If you have more questions, leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, peace.